this is Chad Nelson, the CEO of the Surfrider Foundation, and I'm here with Katie Day, Surfrider's staff scientist, to talk about issues related to COVID-19 and going to the beach and surfing. So, Katie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, for the last few weeks, you've been doing a deep dive into sort of the science around COVID-19 and water quality and the beach. And so, maybe you can give us a quick take on sort of what you've been up to.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a ton of interest in, what are our risks? What are the transmission routes of COVID-19, especially at the beach? For our community, this is where everyone's at, and really want to have a deeper understanding of what our potential risks are. So I've been following the science almost on a daily basis for the past month, closely monitoring what are the available research reports and published literature that's out there that kind of dives into this topic. Unfortunately, because COVID-19 is a new virus, there really wasn't a lot of information. Every day we're getting more information as more research becomes available, but we've had to rely on the previous findings from other coronaviruses like SARS and MERS that are closely related to COVID-19, but have been around for a longer time, so we have more research on them.
So, yeah, that's really helpful. So we're going to try to share the latest science, what we've been able to learn, while at the same time recognizing that this is rapidly evolving and we don't have all the answers, and we're trying to learn, keep track of things that are happening real time.
Absolutely. Things are changing daily as more information becomes available. So the best we can do is to share the information that we've been able to find to date. But please be warned that this could change by this evening.
Okay, Katie, so I think one of the questions we're getting a lot is, hey, I want to go to the beach. I want to go surfing. I feel like I can do that without spreading, the virus. But maybe if we kind of walk through the step-by-step process from leaving your house to going to the beach, we can help explain why that's still not something that's particularly safe.
Yeah, absolutely. There might be more opportunities for transmission in that just getting to the beach and paddling out than you might think. So if you get in your car, you drive to the beach and you park, and you get out of your car, if there's other people parking nearby you, you're in a crowded parking lot, there's risk of inhaling potentially, contaminated or infectious aerosols and droplets from people breathing or coughing nearby. Same goes when you're walking through the beach access point, when you're walking on the sand to get to the water, when you're paddling out. Other beachgoers, other surfers could all pose a risk to you, and then you could also pose a risk to them. There's also the risk of touching contaminated surfaces. If you have to pay at the parking meter at the beach and you touch that parking meter that other people may have touched or had aerosols or droplets land on, you could then be contracting that disease on your hand and then touching your eye, nose, or mouth later and getting sick. Same goes for handrails, for, if you have to use the bathroom, really any surfaces or facilities at the beach or other areas that you touch that are publicly used, you're increasing your risk of contracting the disease.
So for the same reason we're not supposed to go to bars and restaurants or go to, see live music, all of these things are designed to create physical space to stop the spread of COVID-19. And it sounds like, going to the beach and going surfing in general in a lot of places in the world are going to present those same risks. And that's why, at least for now, during the stay-at-home orders, we're telling people that, they should really avoid crowded public spaces, including the beach and including popular surf spots.
Exactly.
So we'll get into some of the science around water quality in a second. But it sounds like, so in many ways, going to the beach isn't very different than going to the supermarket or the other things that we're being told, which is we should be practicing physical distancing. We should be trying to wear masks to reduce our the plume that we're spreading as individuals. And I think one of the questions is 6 feet enough? And I think there's that's still open to debate too.
Exactly. Yeah. The basis for the CDC recommendation to have physical distancing of 6 feet apart from each other is based on, previous research that showed water droplets when we exhale or cough travel, maximum of 6 feet. Unfortunately, recent literature is actually showing that droplets and aerosols can travel much farther and potentially be infectious. So they could maybe carry that infectious dose of the virus farther distances. So even if you stay 6 feet from someone else, you could still be at high risk of inhaling the virus.
All right. So when it comes to the beach, it's the same thing, right? It's avoiding crowds. It's not getting next to each other, especially in surfing when people tend to be shoulder to shoulder or in crowds. And so these are the things we're going to need to continue to avoid to try to, help flatten the curve and stop the spread.
You're right. Yep. Whether you're at the beach, on the sand, in the lineup, you're on a trail, if you're in a park, anywhere that you have exposure to other people that are frequently visited, or crowded, your risk is going to be the same.
All right. Thank you. I think that helps really clarify things. And so let's talk about water quality for a little bit. Obviously, there are pathogens in runoff and wastewater. This is a concern for Surfrider, for decades, long before COVID-19. This just creates, I think, more sensitivity to risks from going out into the water. So can you give us a quick summary of kind of what we know about the impacts of COVID-19 and picking that up via, water or polluted water out in the ocean?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of two main parts to think about with this here is one, if the virus is able to stay alive and survive and be infectious in saltwater environments in general. And then two, whether it's able to be infectious in sewage, which unfortunately, as a lot of us know, frequently happens to our coastlines. They get contaminated with raw sewage from spills or, stormwater runoff and things of that sort. So when it comes to just the ability of the virus to stay viable in water, we don't know. A recent webinar by the Water Research Foundation found that the virus has been able to remain viable, infectious, at least for a short period of time in freshwater environments, like natural freshwater environments like lakes and streams. But we haven't seen any research that shows that the virus is able to remain viable, infectious in saltwater. So that is still a massive unknown. When it comes to sewage, there's a lot of literature that's actually found the virus in sewage. So if in the stool of infected individuals, they've been able to actually find the virus present. And they found that based on its RNA. I don't want to get too super detailed here, but just because the virus is present doesn't mean that it's infectious. So it needs both an intact RNA as well as an intact outer envelope. Coronaviruses and COVID-19 it's called an enveloped virus, and that envelope really needs to be intact for it to remain infectious. And to date, there hasn't been any literature that confirms that an infectious virus has been found in the stool of individuals. So I'm getting nitty gritty and I apologize, but the point is we don't yet know. We know it's present, but we don't know if it's infectious.
So also it sounds like if this is, going through proper wastewater treatment, which most of our waste is, that's probably pretty safe. Runoff, unless it contains like human waste, is probably also, pretty unlikely. But if we have situations, which sadly we do, where we have sewage spills, or like down in Imperial Beach in the Tijuana River, we know that there's raw sewage in that water. Those are places where there still could be a viable risk, and we need more research to understand that.
Exactly. Yeah, because that virus is enveloped, it's considered, highly susceptible to classic chlorinization and treatment methods at wastewater treatment plants. So the discharge from properly functioning wastewater treatment plants are considered, very low risk for spreading the virus into the environment. But it's those raw sewage release instances where it hasn't been treated and it can contain all sorts of other viruses and pathogens that we all know too well. That's where the biggest concern lies regarding a potential transmission route for COVID-19 at the coastline in the actual waterways. It's water polluted with raw sewage.
And in those cases, we shouldn't be in that water anyway for like a whole range of health threats.
Exactly. For at least 3 days, let that dilute and maybe get killed off a bit by UV exposure and other ways. But yep.
Exactly. Yep. So that's also super helpful. So there's been some controversy in the media around this idea that, I think this is a good follow on that viruses in the water can get aerosolized by the water splashing and bubbles popping. So this is viruses or bacteria that are in the water that through wave action and other things get resuspended into the air that we could breathe in. And I think that created some confusion about sort of the risks here. So maybe you can talk, and it sounds to me like the answer you just gave kind of explains that problem also. So maybe you could give us a quick little insight into what we know about that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, marine aerosols is a really interesting study area. There has been some concern and questioning about the potential for aerosols to carry other viruses. There was a recent statement and reporting on the potential for COVID-19 to become aerosolized in sea spray. But at this point, that's completely unsubstantiated. We haven't seen any evidence of this actually occurring yet. I'm not saying that it's not possible. Research really is needed to dive into this to determine if that's a potential risk or transmission route. But at this point, there's so many unknowns. We don't know if it's able to remain viable in saltwater. We don't know if it's present in sewage. And if either of those are a no, then it's probably unlikely that any virus could be aerosolized if it's not even present. The good news is, as of last week, the National Science Foundation actually is funding a study that is going to start this week and go through March of next year to test this very hypothesis to see if, sea spray in raw sewage contaminated coastal waterways, such as at the border of, the U.S.-Mexico border and coastal communities like Imperial Beach, who experience frequent and persistent raw sewage spills. They're going to test to see if it's possible for the virus to stay viable in the coastal waterways and become aerosolized. So we'll find out.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, if it's not viable in the water and infectious in the water, if it gets aerosolized and it's not infectious, then it's not a risk. And obviously, if it is, then we need to do some more research and find out.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you. You've also put a ton of information on a great blog post at surfrider.org. So if you want to dive into any of these topics in more depth, please check that out. Obviously, we're going to be continuing to follow this. We'll be posting more information when we find new research out there. Thank you again, Katie, for all the work and for helping explain these things. It sounds to me like the bottom line takeaway is, as long as we're asking people to maintain physical distancing, that should apply at the beach and as surfing as well. And if when we think about going out to our coastlines, any sort of pollution that we find at our coastlines presents a health risk, and COVID-19 could be part of that equation, but there's a million other ways that you can risk your health when the water's contaminated. So we should be stopping that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and until we can really understand how far this infectious virus is able to travel through the air, even maintaining a 6-foot distance, wearing a mask, there's still risks involved. So the best thing we can possibly do in this time of so many unknowns and uncertainty is to stay home as much as possible and hope this thing passes soon so we can get back out in the water.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say at the end of this, you're a surfer, I'm a surfer. We love the beach. We want to get out there as soon as possible. And, we'll be hoping and working and trying to find ways that we can do that responsibly as soon as the time is right. And it's clearly not there now, but hopefully, in the coming weeks and months, we'll be able to figure that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as more research becomes available, we'll be more equipped to learn what we can do to stay safe when those beaches do open back up.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you again for taking the time, and follow us on surfrider.org, and we'll keep you updated with the latest science.
Thanks.